welcome to Dock Chat, the podcast that brings you the stories of the unique community of people who work, live and play in the historic Dockyard, Chatham. In this episode, we hear from John DeRose, volunteer reading room steward. We also preview an exciting exhibition in No. 1 Smithery. In this part, John tells us about his career, much of which was working at Chatham Dockyard.
I started my apprenticeship in 1962. First 2 years were in the training centre, the old boathouse which is north of the mast pond. Once you'd done your 2 years, you were moved to other sections, and I did the scree board, which was the area on Museum Square, which has been demolished now. I did the light plate shop, which is the Ship and Trades pub car park now. I worked on HMS Forth, miscellaneous frigates, for those last 3 years, and I spent 6 months in the drawing office to see how that worked. A lot of the time during the third year was spent working in No. 5, 6 and 7 slips, working on the O-class submarines as we were building them. I got involved in Ocelot and the 3 Canadian submarines. So when I go on board Ocelot nowadays, I feel quite at home. There's a picture of me at the entrance when I was 17 years old. My wife doesn't recognise me, but I'm convinced her it is me. It was before I met her. So in 1967, I decided I wanted to spend 2 years at my tools. I was invited to go straight to the drawing office, but I wanted the experience of working on boats with a mate, earning money, piecework on ventilation systems. So for 2 years, I spent afloat working on frigates, HMS Plymouth, HMS Diamond, the Fort Langley, HMS Hardy, and several other ships during those 2 years. And at the end of the 2 years, I decided it was getting far too cold in the winter, and so that's when I decided I'd take up the opportunity of going into the drawing office. So I got that position, was promoted to a substantive draftsman, and then spent 2 years working in the drawing office, which was 2 office blocks which were knocked down, which are now where the infants' reception area is, and near the Ramada Hotel. The mould loft was on the top floor of one of those buildings, and up there we had a full-scale mock-up in wood of the O-class submarine, and therefore whenever there was a need to fix something else in the submarine, we went up there to make sure it fitted with all the other wooden mock-ups. And unfortunately, when they destroyed those buildings, they destroyed that mock-up, which is a great shame because I think that would have been a real added bonus to the dockyard. However, that's the way it was. In 1969, I'd taken the inspector's exam, and during this period from 1962 through to 1969, I was also doing day release in the Dockyard College. And it's there when I achieved the qualifications I needed in later life, which we'll come to a little later on. So for those 2 years, having taken the inspector's exam and passed the inspector's exam, I was then in 1971 offered a position of PDO 3, inspector of shipwrights, and I was moved into the nuclear complex, where I spent 4 years working on shift work, looking after the reactor compartment, our nuclear standards branch, and then after that, when refuelling one of the submarines, I don't remember which one it was, but I worked on Valiant and Warspite, Dreadnought, Churchill probably. So that 4 years was, I had to take a 9-week degree equivalent course up at the Royal Naval College at Greenwich, the Nuclear Dockyard course, number 3. I passed that, which enabled me to carry on working in the nuclear department. By the end of 4 years there, I decided that I should ask if I can get back to my trade, which is a shipwright. So they agreed, and I was transferred out of nuclear into the afloat division, constructive division, I think it's properly called. And I spent a few months as inspector in charge of the trade office. And the trade office is the Ship and Trades pub. My office was in the hotel area above the pub, and I've been up there and had a look round. It looks a lot different to what it was when I was looking after the estimators and the progressmen who were chasing up all the goods for the people afloat. At the end of 75, early 76, I was then taken out of the trade office and given the role which I'd always wanted as an inspector of shipwrights afloat. Inspector of shipwrights is responsible for all the shipwrights on the ship and the labourers, and when he has a boat, he's called the inspector of the boat, because his other role is to coordinate activities for other trades when they wanted to use labourers or slingers, which were coming under my control. And I was also responsible for the jetty, making sure it was kept tidy and clean, and for the cleanliness of the ship. So I often had people coming round from the unions looking at the cleanliness and safety of the ship. Health and safety was just beginning to take off. So that was another of my roles as the safety officer of the vessel. Throughout 76 through to August 82, I worked on the Corps of Transport's landing craft order map. RG Masters was a small vessel, HMS Plymouth, HMS Real, HMS Scylla, HMS Diomede, HMS Wakeful, Pollington, Brinton, Yarmouth, and was very much involved in the 1976 Cod War repairs, HMS Yarmouth being one of those which we have a great photograph of, because these little small ships with thin hulls had long arguments with the Icelandic gunboats. They always came off worse. So when they came into Chatham, I did a few of those repairs. My first major refit was HMS Rothesay, which began in about 1977, 78. And I took her through from de-equipping her to sending her out on trials, which I attended. As I said before, I was coordinating all the work of the other trades, and that refit to 2.5 years. And it so happens that one of the researchers who comes in on Tuesday was a serving petty officer on board HMS Rothesay. So although we didn't meet each other in those years, we now talk about HMS Rothesay with a lot of affection. And as I say, I took her through from the beginning to the end. Then I was put on, having done that major refit, I was put on HMS Hermione, which was the last refit Chatham did of a frigate. We had 2 inspectors on there. There was so much work to do. So there was a major job to do in the dock and fitting in new hull outfits and various things like that. My responsibility was all the dock work. So we docked the ship down, and I spent the next 12 months or so working on all the underwater work, and then finally undocked the ship sometime in 1981. And then I left that ship and left it to my colleague, Bill Swinhoe, who carried on until the yard closed, or until the ship left and went to Devonport to be completed. And he stayed with that ship. I used the 3 dry docks, which we currently use today, number 2, 3 and 4. 2 has Cavalier in it, 3 has Ocelot, and 4 has Gannet. And my job was refitting minesweepers and smaller craft. So I docked them down in those dry docks, and remember well when I visit the docks now, running up and down the steps as a fit young man. And nowadays I struggle to get down the steps with handrails. However, that is what it is. And when I left the yard, which I'll come to a little later on, I did come back when number 4 dock was being used by a private contractor called Crescent Shipping. And I came in as a Lloyd's surveyor. The office currently called Chargeman's between 3 dock and number 4 dock was my office for a year. And I've tried to get the trust to change it to an inspector's office, but they call it Chargeman's still. It was my office, and all my chargemen lived outside in caravans. But that's just an aside, really. It was a shock when closure was announced. Morale plummeted, of course. And for some time, we all thought we had a job for life. But that wasn't going to happen. And I remember going home and telling my wife, and we both realised life was going to change quite drastically. However, I carried on working through 1981, working on various ships, doing a little bit in preparation for the Falklands. We didn't do too much here as regards ship preparation until after I left, but there were a few ships that came in that needed some alterations done before they went down to the Falklands Islands. I used my qualifications in 1982, which I decided I needed to go somewhere. I looked around the country and decided I didn't really want to go to any other dockyard. I knew Rosyth because my other part of my family are up there. I went to a visit, Devonport, and although it was okay, I took my family with me. They gave us free coach trips to go and look at these yards. That's when I said to my wife that I'm going to use my qualifications, which I'd attained in the Dockyard College, and see what they're worth. So I went to Lloyd's Register, among others, and Lloyd's Register Shipping took me on at a 35-year-old experienced ship manager, and I became a surveyor. I knew warships, I didn't know commercial ships, and Lloyd's, of course, deals with commercial ships at that time. They gave me some training. I went to Greenock for a few months. I went to Tilbury, and I went to one or two other offices learning about merchant ships. And while I was up in Greenock, I called my wife up because we had a holiday over on the east side with my brother. And my boss rang me from London and said, "We want you to come down to London. I need to have a chat with you." So I went down to London. I flew to London on that day, came into the office at 71 Fenchurch Street, and he said to me, "Well, at least I've got you down here and you go on holiday and you're close to home." I said, "Unfortunately, my wife and family are up in Rosyth, so I'll be going out there after I finish this interview." He said, "Well, there are a few places in the world which are considered to be not very sociable. And one of them is Korea, and another one is Japan, they're all so different to UK. But the other one is China." And I thought to myself, he's sending me to China. And he did. So having come down, hoping that I was going to get a job somewhere very sociable, I didn't. I was sent to China, and I'll come back to that in the second part of this podcast. Now, I love being here where I first started work. I'm one of the oldest workers left, and as such, I'm proud of the work I did here, and now I'm proud of the work I do here. I feel very involved as part of the whole team, on duty about 3 days a week.
More from John later. To find out more about visiting the Dockyard, go to the website, which is easily accessible by typing Historic Dockyard Chatham in your browser, or if you want the website address, it is thedockyard.co.uk. That is thedockyard.co.uk. You will be able to buy tickets online, and the great thing is the cost of a ticket gives you access to the Dockyard for a year. Please note the Dockyard closes to the public mid-November, apart from special, separately ticketed events. We are thrilled to present the internationally acclaimed Brickwrecks, Sunken Ships in Lego Bricks, making its UK debut at the Dockyard. The exhibition is open daily to the 31st of August and is included in the annual ticket price. In this part, John tells us about his work as a volunteer at the Dockyard.
In 2011, I joined the Historical Society at Chatham, and I'm now the membership secretary of it, and I became a volunteer for the Trust. First of all, I was in the learning team, and we escort school parties and university parties and other groups around, giving them education according to a syllabus which the Dockyard agrees with the school. My role is basically chaperoning and escorting, knowing where the toilets are, knowing when lunch breaks are going to occur, and chasing people up, or schools up, students up, to be at the right place at the right time. I also worked in the old library, labelling books for storage and transfer, because they were going to close the old library and open the new reading room sometime in the future, having done the refurbishment on the fitted rigging house. I also did some research during that period. I became a reading room steward. I asked for applications, and then I assisted in setting up the new reading room, identifying, locating books. Approximately 8,000 are in the reading room at the moment. They're used for research purposes and recording all of them in the Trust's online systems. So I became a bit of an expert on some of the systems that I didn't know in the past. We have many old and valuable books, predominantly associated with the Royal Navy, some of them associated with Chatham Dockyard. And the reading room contains books on all aspects of naval history, exploration, shipwrecks, and many, many other subjects, some of which are loosely associated with the Dockyard, others are very pertinent. I also receive donations and record them in the computer systems as requested by the collections team. And I assist the collections team in various other aspects as and when they require my help. We also have another 8,000 plus books up in the archive. This process is similar to the one in the reading room and is ongoing. And that's currently the work I'm doing at the moment. My main role as a reading room steward is to assist researchers in the reading room. Some of them by appointment, which they ring up and ask to come in, and others as walk-ins from the gallery. And we welcome anybody who wants to come in and just knock on the window or ring the bell. We're happy to assist. We've had as many as 400 researchers in the past few years. Many have connections to the Yard or the Navy, and others just as an interest to come and see what the books are like. And some of them get lost in looking around. There was one particular which I want to mention, had an uncle who was part of the same Royal Marine contingent as my dad in 1940. They were sent to Calais, there's 80 of them, to defend Calais while the Dunkirk evacuation was going on. As I say, there were 80 of them. My father became a prisoner of war for 5 years, but this uncle, the gentleman that came in, was one of the 12 who made it back to the UK. And he had a very eventful war and survived the war. So my conversations with him were very moving, and it's a great pity that both his uncle and my dad have passed away, because they must have known each other personally at that time. I see a few old mates who come in. They come into the Dockyard for a visit with their grandchildren and their children. And when they see me in the reading room, they knock on the window and we have a long chat. I'm also the organiser of the Chatham Dockyard Workers Reunion that we have once a year in May. And we have 60 to 70, sometimes 80 people that come along that evening for a drink and a chat, and we organise some food at the same time. And I've been doing that for about 12 years now. I also assist the Trust in exhibitions and displays with the collections team and the other members of the Trust. So currently, as I think I said before, I love being here. I first started work here. I enjoy the work I do. I enjoy the people I work with. And my wife enjoys me coming out a few days a week and getting out of her hair. She maintains that, and I think I said this before in another interview, she maintains that I had 3 loves in life. One is books, one is ships, and the other one is her, but not necessarily in that order.
We are now on 11 podcast platforms, including Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube. You can visit any of the 11 podcast platform websites or download their free apps from the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. If you have enjoyed our podcast, please hit the subscribe button and you will be sent a notification whenever a new episode is added. To contact us about the podcasts, please email us at podcast@chdt.org.uk. That's podcast@chdt.org.uk. So until the next time, this is John saying goodbye and take care.